before we move into introductions. So good morning again. My name is Erin Barger, the project manager of Envision Athens, which is the 20-year community and economic development strategy for Athens-Clarke County. Some of you have heard this so many times, others of you haven't, so I will be quick about it. Our work is organized across 14 different domains that can be categorized in terms of people, place, and prosperity. This is the work group for the safety domain. And this group has been working collaboratively for some time together to pursue the priority action that you see in the chat box, which is to develop a comprehensive community plan of supervision that provides the optimum blend of accountability and opportunity. So it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. If we could just do kind of a quick popcorn, and I will call on you and invite you to share your name and your affiliation. Let me start, if I might, by introducing, I started to say special guest, but really he's just one of us and is our new key partner and champion, and that is Chief Mark Pulliam. I had the honor of spending a little bit of time with him. I think he was not yet started, but he's that kind of guy. I think he met me on a Friday in his free time and shared some time with me and Deborah Gonzalez so we could just kind of get him oriented to some of the things that this group had been doing. And I just want to share with you all what we shared with him, which is this group enjoyed such a strong and rich relationship with Dale Allen. There is no way our group could be where it is today or had made the strides that we were able to make without his leadership. And just as much as this group embraced his leadership and supported his leadership, we are equally excited to welcome Chief Pulliam and are ready to help you make the most of your opportunities, sir. So why don't we start with you introducing yourself to us, and then we'll go around the group and get this thing moving.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Pulliam, born and raised in Clarke County. Went through the schools here. I was with the police department for about 17 years, and just excited to be back. Even though we've got some big shoes to fill, but excited to be back with the county and back home.
Thank you. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. And then another person who has been incredibly instrumental in this work and has been with us every step of the way is Jay Johnson. So Jay, I know we all know you, but we'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Jay Johnson. I'm the Deputy Chief of Probation. I just tried to hold things together while we were going through the process of finding a new chief. I'm excited to have Mark here. I get the pleasure of now trying to teach him probation and get him up to speed in the county. And but he's gotten his feet wet and we're moving right along. So looking forward to good things.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for all your work. Pryor.
Hi, Pryor Green, 36 years in community corrections, currently working part-time as an evidence-based practice manager for community corrections in Virginia, doing some exciting projects here right now, working with Deborah's office in an exciting project where we're looking at the pretrial program and ways to expand that. And awesome program. Fortunate to work with her.
Thank you. And thanks for that transition. Next, Deborah Gonzalez.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deborah Gonzalez. I'm the District Attorney of the Western Judicial Circuit, have been part of this group for a couple of years and look forward to continuing to do this work together. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. Rebecca.
Morning, my name is Rebecca Fogel. I'm now the Chief Assistant in the District Attorney's Office. I actually joined this group a couple of years ago also as the Deputy Chief when Mr. Malden was still in office and was asked to join by actually Chief Allen. I expect Chief Pulliam to pay me a lot of money not to tell stories on him that I know. Because I know all his brothers and his whole family and have known Mark for a while and worked with him in SVU and can tell some tall tales on Mark.
Sounds like there's an after hours drink in order at some point. So we'll all look forward to that. Next, Mike Kraft.
Good morning. I'm Mike Kraft. I am retired after a career with about 30 years with Community Corrections as Director of Probation for the Department of Corrections and also Director of Court Board and Field Services for the Department of Community Supervision. My expertise is on the state level.
Yeah, we need your experience and expertise, Mike. Thanks for sticking with us, even in retirement. I appreciate that. Next, Elisa.
Good morning. I'm Elisa Zarate. I'm the court administrator for the Athens Clarke County Courts, and I've been with this group since May when I started in this position. But I've been involved with Envision Athens, I think, since early on in 2016 or 2017. I don't remember when that started, but.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Elisa. TJ.
Good morning, everybody. I'm TJ Bement. I'm the District Court Administrator for the 10th District, which includes Athens Clarke County. Been on helping out with this for the last few years. Dale kind of brought me in and covered for you all when you all did not have a local court administrator.
That's right. Thank you, TJ. Laura Alexander.
Hey, I'm Laura Alexander. I'm with Advantage Behavioral Health Systems.
Welcome. And Judge Sweat, I think, is currently making a smoothie, so I won't call on him. Gwen Littleton, if you're there, good morning. Feel free to say hi.
Good morning. I'm Gwen Littleton, and I guess I've been with this group for a while, but I pop on, so I can know what's going on, so I can take it back to my people in my community. Love every one of y'all.
We appreciate you, Gwen. So Gwen, thank you for your work as a neighborhood leader. You're doing a lot of important things. We appreciate you. Judge Sweat, I see a smoothie in your hand, so your work is done. Do you want to say good morning again?
Good morning. I'm David Sweat, and I am a senior judge. I was formerly a judge in the Western Circuit, and really appreciate all the work that this group has done. I feel that I'm really proud that we have this new chief and the new district attorney with us. I think this is really great to have this participation. So thanks all very much.
Absolutely, Judge. Thank you. Judge Auslander, good morning. He might be. Oh, there he is.
Good morning. Sorry, just
no, you're good.
Running a few minutes late to the office. Chuck Auslander with the state court, also with the treatment courts of Athens Clarke County and the DUI treatment court.
I love it. Thanks, Judge. Jeff Petrie.
Hey, Aaron, team. Jeff Petrie, I work for Georgia Power Company. I'm the regional director for Northeast Georgia. So I got 23 counties across Northeast Georgia with a team of 8 who does community development, which is a big umbrella for a lot of stuff. I came in March. A lot of people blame the pandemic on me, but I've been here trying to get to know people and understand the community. I've been engaged with Envision Athens since the beginning. Erin and I have lunches together and I pick her brain about the community. I'm just trying to learn and learn and learn and learn. She thought that me sitting in and seeing your faces and get to know you a little bit might help me, and it already has. So thank you for letting me audit the program today.
Thanks so much for joining. And guys, thanks for being patient with the introductions. I think today they are particularly important. So anyone who's new can kind of see who's been assembling, and you have lovely human faces. So it's a good use of time. Harrison.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Harrison Huang. I'm working under Meg and Dr. Adams with the Athens Wellbeing Project.
Thank you, Harrison. And speaking of Meg.
Hey, everybody. I'm Meg Bramlett. I am a graduate research assistant for the Athens Wellbeing Project. I'm here representing Dr. Grace Bagwell Adams, who is officially on maternity leave. It's good to be with y'all.
And I think I have everyone except our Envision team. So let's round it out. Welcome to the Envision team, starting with you, John.
Hey everybody, John Morris, project coordinator at Envision.
And Savannah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Savannah Farr. I'm a fellow with Envision.
All right, welcome everyone. So as we said in the beginning, this group is together for the purpose of partnering with our local misdemeanor probation office and see how together we can ensure that the practices and procedures and that engagement can be person-centered and can provide the right amount of opportunity and accountability depending on the individuals served by that program. So very relevant to our purposes for meeting are just a sense of how public safety is perceived locally in Athens, Clarke County. And so unlike most communities, we are blessed with the opportunity to have Athens Wellbeing Project, which you are probably pretty familiar with, but if not, I think what's really important to know about that is that it is locally sourced and the data from it are household level representative data. So unlike many other data sources, you can actually take data points from this and consider them to be representative of the diversity of the community. So this morning, as Meg mentioned, our dear partner, Grace Adams, just welcomed a baby into the world last week. He is lovely. His name is Theodore, also known as Teddy. Grace is doing just fine. So Meg, thank you so much for your great, solid work with Grace, and just going to turn it over to you and John to do your screen sharing and take it away with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I want to start off by saying, in no self-deprecating way, just an honest way, I'm no Grace Bagwell Adams, but I'm going to do my very best to present this report. We worked really hard on it. I've been with AWP for about 3 years, so I'm going to share everything that's in this report and hopefully answer all the questions that y'all have. Okay. So first and foremost, AWP would not be, thank you, would not be possible without our community partners. In every way you can imagine, we are supported by all of these organizations. Special thanks to Envision for hosting this today so that we can give this really important talk. And here's what I'm going to go through today. So I'll give a little bit of an overview to add to what Erin said about the Athens Wellbeing Project. And then I'm going to give a little bit of context for the community safety report. And then the sections of quantitative data analysis include 911 telecommunications, ACCPD officer interaction, and ACCPD community perceptions. We also have some qualitative analysis that's included in this report. And I just like to ask if y'all come up with any questions, if you could put them in the chat or hang on to them till the end. I'd like to just kind of move through everything, and then we do have some time set aside so that we can have a good Q&A and discussion session. All right. So it's our goal to assist community leaders and institutions. We like to say that the community owns this project and these data. We're just sort of the stewards. So we do our best to provide a really comprehensive snapshot of our community. We focus on not only needs, barriers and gaps, but we also really take a strengths-based approach and like to highlight the assets of our community. It's a really important part of our work because we are such a strong collaborative community. And there are certainly a number of assets that we can highlight. We work to provide more robust information for leaders and institutions. There are some great secondary data sources that are available, and what we work to do is fill in those gaps. So we try and answer questions that can't be answered with existing data sources. And ultimately, we want to inform policy and practice in a variety of settings. We are not a political organization, and we don't make any sort of policy, but our goal is for policy and practice to be very data informed and representative. So that's one of our key goals. We focus on 5 domains. So education and lifelong learning, health, housing, community safety, and civic vitality. I'm going to focus on community safety today. However, as you all know, as practitioners and just people in this world, all of these things are very interconnected. So we certainly pull from a number of different domains whenever we're looking at one individual domain. So this is this data is from the second iteration of Athens Wellbeing Project. It was collected in the fall and winter of 2018. Surveys were distributed in both paper format and electronically, and they were provided in both English and Spanish. To the extent it was possible, we used validated questions. So those are questions that have already been tested in the field and have been shown to answer the questions we're trying to ask. As Aaron mentioned, these are household level data. They're not individual level, but they are household level. And we had over 1,000 respondents in this second wave of data collection. It is a representative sample. Households were randomly selected and data has been weighted. We did also do additional targeted sampling for some chronically underrepresented groups, including homeless individuals, older adults, Athens Housing Authority residents, and it looks like I left off our Latinx community members and non-English speaking residents. Okay, so a bit of context here. The community safety report questions ask about not only experiences, but also perceptions, which we all know are a little bit less tangible. When we ask if somebody's been diagnosed with diabetes, while a number of contributing factors might have led to that diagnosis, it's a pretty basic yes or no question. So perceptions are shaped by a number of factors. Individual, local, state, and national events have taken place. There has been, as we all know, a lot going on in this area. So we just want to really kind of make it clear that we're not really looking at how or why, we're just giving an overview of the landscape and basically want to just keep in mind that it's complicated. Okay, so the first section is about people who had an experience with 911 telecommunications. 20% of households reported calling the ACC 911 call center in the past year. Almost all of them reached an operator, and roughly 1 in 3 had an officer dispatched. We don't know necessarily why an officer wasn't dispatched or anything like that, but about 66% ended up having somebody come out to their place or location. So, and demographics of the caller. So the average age was about 40. About half were married, 8% veterans, and almost 90% were employed. Pretty similar to the full sample in this area. Also in monthly income and employment. Some areas where it differed from the full sample, callers were more likely to be Latinx or Black and less likely to be enrolled in college. I do want to say here, we offered a number of options and people could select more than one option for race. However, the number of respondents who reported calling 911 in races other than Black or white were not high enough to have any statistical significance. So I just want to let y'all know that those people were included and they just aren't a part of this sort of overview presentation. So while 11% of callers were Latinx, 38% of Latinx households called 911, which is an important distinction. It's a pretty big number and it's also statistically significant. So it's almost 20% higher than non-Latinx households. 20% of non-Latinx households called and almost 40% of Latinx called. It's a big difference, almost double. White households were significantly less likely to call than non-white households, about 12% less. And then if somebody had reported calling an operator, 911 operator, they were then prompted to answer some questions about their experience. And you can see here that only 6% reported being either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with their experience, and almost 90% were satisfied or very satisfied. And just these are good numbers. So this is something we can be really proud of. We then broke it down a little bit more, asking about experience with speed, operator professionalism, operator knowledge and understanding, and operator customer service. Again, you see a great majority of people report being either satisfied or very satisfied, between 84 and 88%, and a nice low number between 1 and 5%, either satisfied or very dissatisfied. So with this representative sample and all of the information we have, we're able to do multivariate regression. And that just sort of means that we're able to control for other variables. So for example, when I say that Black and Latinx callers reported lower levels of satisfaction with speed, professionalism, knowledge, and customer service, we have controlled for certain variables such as age and income. So regardless of age, regardless of income, this was found to be true. Females were more likely to call and more likely to report being satisfied with the speed of the call as compared to males. That's also true for the professionalism of the operator. White households and married households had the highest level of satisfaction overall. And among all variables, there was no difference in satisfaction with operator knowledge. Next, we'll look at reports about the ACCPD officer interaction. So similar to the 911 telecommunications, individuals were asked whether or not they had had any interaction with an ACCPD officer in the past 12 months. If they reported that they had, they were then prompted to answer some specific questions about their experience. So 31% of households had had contact with an officer in the last 12 months. 11% more than who had interacted with or who had called a 911 operator. Demographics here are somewhat similar. Average age also 40 years, married 66%, UGA students 26%, Latinx 7%. These are representative, similar to the full sample. Some ways that this group of individuals differed from the full sample: people who had interactions with officers were more likely to be a veteran, more likely to be white or married. Individuals who were Black and female were less likely to have officer interaction. A couple of significant findings that we thought were important to highlight here. Veterans were significantly more likely to have contact with an officer than individuals who were not veterans, as a 12% higher likelihood of having an interaction. And white households were significantly more likely to have contact with an officer than non-white households. That's a 16% greater likelihood of interacting with an officer. Similar to the telecommunications, we asked about the satisfaction of the interaction and assistance provided. So you can see about 10% were either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, but 80%, about 4 out of 5, were either satisfied or very satisfied with the assistance they received. And again, here we've broken it down somewhat. So between 82 and 84% were satisfied with the speed, professionalism, and knowledge and understanding of the officer. And the numbers were close to 1 in 10 for all areas of those reporting being either dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, between 10 and 13%. Latinx responses were significantly more negative as compared to non-Latinx responses. This was highly significant, and it was an important finding that was it was consistent among the main and sub questions. Another important finding was that food insecure households were significantly less likely to have contact and overall expressed lower satisfaction than non-food insecure households with their interaction with officers. Okay, now we're going to move on to perceptions. Go ahead. Thank you. So questions Regardless of interaction with an officer, we're asked about community members' perceptions about things like fairness, respect, confidence in the ACCPD, both officers and employees. We looked at these responses together and we looked at them separately. We found that though there was a significant difference based on whether or not somebody had had an interaction, it was that the selection of neither agree nor disagree was much higher. So when people had had an interaction, they moved to one end or the other. So it wasn't quite as telling, just that if you've had an experience with an officer, you have more of an opinion about the ACCPD. So in this presentation and in the report, we for the most part focus on those who have had an interaction. If you look at the report, there's a little bit more information about those who have not had an interaction. So we wanted to highlight some of the bright spots, some of the strong responses. So about 4 out of 5 people agreed that an officer would treat them with respect if they had any contact with them. They agreed that they had a great deal of respect for ACCPD officers and employees, and they agreed that officers are helpful. And it's about 7% for all categories, either disagree or strongly disagree with those statements. Some areas for improvement, which is interesting. So while about 80% said that they thought they would be treated fairly, only about 40% agree with the statement that officers treat everyone fairly, regardless of who they are. However, you can see as you move to the right on the table, people haven't quite as much shifted to the disagree category. They just become a little bit more ambivalent about their answer. So these are really high neither agree nor disagree responses to these questions. The other sort of lower point was agreement on whether or not officers deal positively with young people. That agreement was just about 50%. But again, you can see the disagree is 11%. We do have this higher number of people that neither agree nor disagree. So after controlling for basically every single variable we could, it turned out that being married was the most significant variable in relation to perceiving officers being helpful. Latinx households who had an officer interaction were less likely to agree that an officer would treat them with respect. This was one area where the movement from the neither with having no interaction to moving to the disagree with having had an interaction was significant and clear. So this is kind of one of the exceptions that we thought was important to highlight that aspect. Black and Latinx households were less likely to agree with positive statements regarding ACCPD officers generally, and overall perceived fairness was lower when a person had an interaction with an officer. I do think it's important to point out that this could include people who get pulled over for speeding and thought they should have been able to talk their way out of a ticket. This could have been all kinds of interactions. So again, we're not answering the why or how, but it was statistically significant that the fairness perceptions decreased with interaction. Okay, so that was all of the quantitative data analysis. Well, not all of it, but some of the spots we wanted to highlight and share with y'all today. This is our qualitative analysis. So at the end of the survey, there were some open-ended questions. Hundreds of people included responses to the open-ended questions, which is phenomenal. Most people put NA and leave it. So we were able to really pull out some good takeaways from these. And we did do the qualitative analysis separately in Spanish and English because some different themes did emerge between the two.
So from the English survey, it was suggested that there be some diversity, cultural sensitivity, and conflict resolution training, as well as more work on dealing with mental health calls and corresponding crises. A lot of people reported that they'd like to see more people of color represented, more racial and ethnic minorities, both as officers and employees of ACCPD, and that there be more investment in youth development and relationships. It was also suggested that there be more officers with Spanish language fluency, and that there be a program to educate citizens about non-emergency resources and phone numbers. They also thought that it would be a good idea to increase engagement in poor and low income communities, and that there be more development in community policing, which focuses more on relationship and trust building, and a more sort of ongoing relationship between community members and police officers instead of an incidents based or response to an incidents based relationship and interaction. From our Spanish language survey, similarly, there was an increased need for increased interpretation and Spanish language services, and an increased visibility in Latin neighborhoods. And again, it was suggested by both groups that there be an effort to increase people of color and racial and ethnic minorities being represented in the ACCPD. There was also it was suggested that the police department work to decrease fear and misunderstanding of law enforcement in the Latinx community. The word fear came up a number of times, and it was a prominent element in the Spanish language survey. And then finally, the suggestion of increased empathy in responding to calls in emergency situations, no matter the subject matter of the call or emergency. So that was an overview of this community safety report. The report in its entirety is about 20 pages long. I've covered most of the major points and findings. If you go to the Athens Wellbeing Project website, you can view the report. It's publicly available. It's also on the ACCPD website. You can also find we've got our health and housing and childcare reports up there as well. You know, as I said, it's all pretty interconnected. So I suggest, I think they're all great. So take a look. Yeah, that's I think oh yes, thank you. I do think it's really important to note AWP would not be possible without a ton of community support. We're getting ready to start the process of launching AWP 3.0. We're going to start planning and preparation in the spring, and we're planning on doing data collection starting in the fall. So we'll keep you all posted on that, but just want you to keep it in your mind so that you can work with us and support us, and we can support you. And it's coming up soon. I'll have information to share on that, hopefully in the next meeting or two. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. If you don't want to talk about them here, you can also feel free to email Dr. Adams. Your email will be sent to me if you email her for the time being. However, if there's something I can't answer for you, I think any questions that y'all have are valuable. So I will hold on to any of them that I'm not able to address, and we can make a special time to get with her and get everything figured out when she gets back mid-April. So thank y'all. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, I will do my best to answer them.
So if you're like me, that was a lot of information to digest. So I have a list of questions, but would love to kick us off with just looking around the gallery wall. If you have a question you're comfortable asking, go ahead. Or if you want to send us something in the chat box, go for it. Otherwise, I will launch my list.
I would say I don't want to volunteer you, Erin, but if anyone wants to ask a question anonymously, you can send it directly to her so that.
Yeah. So I put that in the chat box. Thank you,
Oh,
Meg.
perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. If you have a question that you want me to articulate, I'm happy to do that. I'll go ahead and kick us off while I keep my eye on the chat box and your faces. Just let me know if you have something you want to share. So Meg, looking at the call center data, it was really interesting to me that Latinx households were more likely to utilize 911. I wonder if you all have any ideas on resounding or common themes in that use. In other words, were the calls related to a specific type of response needed, or did you get into that level of granularity?
We don't ask about why people called, but I can speak a bit to some of the qualitative responses, and that there is this great desire to be safe and protected and to build a relationship with officers. So it was very clear from at least the Spanish-speaking Latinx respondents that they did feel a deep desire and connection to police officers. So we don't know specifically why they called, but it was an interesting mix of responses that seemed almost contradictory. But if you think about sort of the layers of what's been going on in the community, it starts to make a little bit more sense why it's complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just stood out to me that while in the later data that you presented around experiences and trust is more negative, the fact that maybe some of the same people are more likely to actually utilize 911, that's just an interesting reality there. So there's enough faith in the system to reach out to 911, but then there's also, when there's an experience with PD, there are some more negative responses in describing that interaction.
Exactly, yeah.
So in groups that were more likely to have a negative perception of their interactions with PD, was there any relationship between male, female there? Do you know? I know that's a very specific question.
There was generally females were more satisfied with the 911 operator experience. They were less satisfied and in less agreement with the positive questions. That being said, the male-female aspect is a little bit tricky because this is household level data, but then the person answering the survey reports their experience. So 70% of respondents were female. However, they were representing their whole household. So it's something, because they're writing these questions from their perspective, specifically these questions, where it's meaningful, but we don't want to draw too many conclusions from it. But generally, females having non-face-to-face interaction, so the 911 operator interaction, were more satisfied people. Females having face-to-face personalized interaction were less satisfied. However, not to a great extent.
And I think it's important to note, I mean, this is not news to anyone on this particular call for sure, but I think what is interesting about conversations like these is when you balance perception with people who have had experiences, something that we're definitely dealing with is just the national news and people's perceptions of things that are sometimes extrapolated and generalized to local in ways that are not necessarily real, but that is what is challenging about perception. So I just think that,
and we give sort of a bigger context statement in the report. And because time is such a strange thing right now, it's important to consider that the issues with ICE and policies around that had gone back and forth, but not to the extent that they have in the last 2 years. The death of George Floyd had not occurred. However, there was a lot of, that's sort of one of the many pivotal incidences. But, Michael Brown died in 2014. He was killed. So there's sort of a continuum of experiences that have really deeply impacted how individuals perceive themselves, their safety, their communities, and the police officers. So it's just, I hate to keep saying it, but it's just so complicated and nuanced. But just keep in mind, these are from 2018. So we're interested to see how this shifts with data collection in 2021 after what's happened.
And I know some of you might be wondering why are we spending time on this in a meeting that's really about probation? But I think that you all have a nuanced understanding enough to acknowledge that people don't end up in probation without having interactions first with PD and associated things. So I think it's very relevant. Deborah?
Yes, so I have a question. This is the 2.0. I'd like to know what happened after the first report was released. Did it change in any way some of what was happening at the police department? Did it have any effect? And then what is it that you hope you accomplish with this report being released?
I can't personally speak to what came out of the first report. I know that we changed some of the ways that we do analysis. We had originally looked at a lot of responses based on elementary school zones, and we've chosen to take a more holistic community approach for this this report. And I don't know, I'm curious to know, and I don't know if anybody here can speak to that, what substantive changes have come out of it. I do know that the police department was eager to get this. They put it on their website, I think 24 hours after we sent it to them. Erin, do you have anything?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So Meg was clear in the beginning that AWP, these are my words, not theirs, takes a fact-friendly approach. Like the data is just, actually one of Grace's favorite quotes is, what is it? Statistics are people with
the tears dried out.
Basically. So it's this very dispassionate portrait of just what is. And I think where the relationship between AWP and Envision Athens is so imperative and important is we can work together to see what is, can we start to understand why that might be, and then what are some changes that we might make. So for instance, the energy around increasing the number of co-responder units, certainly not saying Envision or AWP is to be credited for that, but the way that this dynamic has worked in the past is if there are perceptions around an area for improvement, then that can make it into the plan of work for Envision Athens. And that kind of becomes, a success measure that the community agrees to pursue. So would that expansion in co-responders happened regardless? I don't know, but I don't think it hurt that we have data to point to, these needed areas of growth. And then that kind of drives the conversations that lead to policy changes.
And I also know from the first report, what we do is we put together what we think is an important comprehensive report, but the survey instrument is available on the website as well. So if any of our stakeholders or non-stakeholders see a question that they want answered that's not there, we're able to sort of run that separately and provide any sort of statistical analysis that would be relevant to the organization. So I do know that the first report prompted a couple of questions, which we were able to sort of provide some supplemental responses to.
So Beto shared an interesting kind of perspective in the chat. Beto, would you mind to kind of speak to that?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I was working for a well-being project, collecting data in what they call the special community, the special, and that was because the migrant community is undocumented, it's hard to reach, and normally they don't open the door. And even though that we say that police, we've been having with Dignidad Inmigrante and Athens Immigrant Rights Coalition, this fight for breach the link between the justice in our community for many, many years. Anyway, that because I have the trust and I know most of them, I was able to have a conversations, which take me more time than usual for the surveys. But anyway, what was I know why I'm part of that community, but when you ask, do you trust the police? They say yes. And did you call if a police come? I don't know. Any question related to police? Do you respect police? Yes. But when we were talking, they were like a fuck police, and they did this to my neighbor, they did this to my family, and we know that the police and the local state. And they don't have idea which the difference between the state patrol and the local police, the city police and the county police. Most of the community, they don't. And I don't think also American citizens quite understand the difference of this complex system. Anyway, that the stories were very heartbreaking. One of the things I highlight there to exemplify that was this story about a woman who police was chasing someone, and that someone parked the car in front of her house, and the police knocked the door, and she opens the door, and the next time she see herself in the car handcuffed, and the guy didn't speak any Spanish, so she brought the kid, like a 10 years old kid, to translate. So can you imagine this little kid translating things like, you don't tell me where is the guy, I'm gonna arrest you? Or things like, I'm gonna arrest your mother if she doesn't tell me the truth. And you know, this white, big, tall guy with guns. And I just imagine how these kids will feel next Christmas when police came with toys. It's like ironic. Probably he will not be one of those toys, or maybe he will take and destroy them. But it's very traumatic, and this is not isolated case. I choose this case because it's almost a norm. The police officers, they don't speak the language. They took the kid, and they really are not prepared. They're not training to do certain questions to these kids. So in the majority of the community, this language about police abusing other people is very present, but also the image of authority, because religion every Sunday, because in the house, they have the authority, the paternalistic model we have in our family, you know, where we're the male and the man. And so this is reinforced. So when you think about police, you think about authority. They don't think about police officers and the way they see it. And I think these kind of things, they are not even taken consideration when the police is training, or when these, well, I think I'm hitting a little bit outside in my opinion, but yeah, that was my experience. This is still been my experience. There's a lot of untrust within the community in general about the police, and the abuses we link, if we mention ICE, we link the abuses the kids suffer in the border. We have a lot of asylum seekers in Athens, and I heard these stories from 6, 7 years old kids who were put in el refrigerador, in the freezer when they arrived. So the first experience was to be in isolation in a very cold place, to break them down after to being separated from their family, and they bring that trauma to our community. It's the first thing we learn from these kids. And when they see police, they make the relationship between authority, police in the border, ICE, police in my home, in my hometown. So yeah, it's this association, and psychologically, the approach we're taking, that we try to bring the police close to our community, bringing toys and Santa Claus. This is making a real short circuit in our brains, because it does not make sense. The authority we see, people see in the TV with the killings we all already know, and also the attitude of police officers. I don't know anymore. I don't have any interaction with police lately, but a few years ago, it was this norm of police saying that I am the authority. So this this association with the task, the tools we apply in the community to bring this community together are not working. is making more and more troubles, in my opinion. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not. Yeah.
Beto, we would be missing key information if you hadn't joined us today. So thank you so much. I think I don't want to try to sum up what you said. I wouldn't do it justice, and I don't think that's appropriate. But I just think maybe a couple of takeaways. There are many, but a couple that we might consider just in with what is next is, one, a clear opportunity and need to help equip all public safety officers to understand the experience of Latinx people, including, not necessarily knowing that a local PD and a state patrol and an ICE officer, that it's assuming too much to assume that someone is going to know the difference there. And I think clearly from the quantitative and the qualitative responses, I think to kind of connect to your question, Deborah, we have a clear opportunity to hear what has been shared today, which is we have some growth to do and some opportunities in terms of more thoughtfully, effectively equipping public safety officers to communicate effectively with the Latinx population. I don't think there's any arguing that point. And I think where Envision Athens has to do its job is, we spend time celebrating and spotlighting and talking about the good. This is the year of the good neighbor. We're not really doing our job if we only talk about what we have already achieved. It is really our job to hold that and equally hold space for listening to people when they say, this is not working. And what I hear Beto saying this morning is something is not working. And we all have improvements to make at the human level. And so that is certainly true at the systems level. Deborah, in the last meeting, we had Officer Salters, I believe, from PD. And that's actually when, we initially started talking about the report, and they made it public within a day of our last safety meeting. So I'm surprised that he wasn't able to join us today. But yeah, it is a little bit awkward to not have anyone from PD with us on this particular conversation. I would think that a very basic follow-up step might be to follow up with PD and just see when they've had some time to, digest these responses, how might decisions be made to increase training and opportunity to more positively connect with the Latinx community. And prior mentions, a way to bridge the language gap. Also, what I pull from this, Meg mentioned AWP 3.0. Envision Athens will actually be engaging in its 2.0. Believe it or not, next year will mark 5 years since Envision Athens created our original action agenda. And what I hear Beto sharing that is edifying and instructive for me is that the qualitative methods are really important in these processes, and being able to capture those pieces of input and information. And there's no way for us to do that without keeping strong relationships and compensating people like Beto to help us gather that information. And that's something that Envision Athens is committing to do next year. So I'm a little speechless at this point, honestly. But if any of you all have anything to share, Deborah?
Yeah, so considering that this report is printed and published, but information like what Beto shared today is not. In other words, anybody who now reads this report, we all know is getting just a part of the picture, but not the whole picture. It might actually, in my mind, a very significant piece that can affect how certain policies are then adopted or certain strategies brought into place. Is there a mechanism to share the information that Beto has shared with us alongside of this report so that people don't think that just what they're seeing is the whole picture?
So to the best of our ability, we try and incorporate little notes and caveats and ways to sort of express what you're talking about, that this is a snapshot. We do our best to collect data. We're never going to be able to tell the full story. I would have to talk to Dr. Adams about if, whether or not we could do some sort of supplemental report, something like that. I'm not quite sure how that works, because this is specifically, this all comes directly from the survey. These are quotes from the respondents, and just for the integrity of the project and the report. I don't know how that works. I've never done that before. I do, however, think your point is critical. And I would be happy to talk to her about what might be possible in the future.
So in any peer review publication, there's this section on limitations. And I think, and AWP does a solid job of acknowledging its limitations. Where I think this one is particularly challenging is AWP is relying, and most data collection is relying upon people self-reporting their reality. And in this particular case, and I'm sure for very good reasons, but what Beto shared, which is critical, and we wouldn't know it unless Beto joined us today, right? Or unless we had a conversation with him outside the space, that for whatever reasons, I'm sure they're good ones, when given the opportunity to respond to a private survey, it seems that at least some people didn't feel comfortable responding and reporting their actual lived experience. So it was what they reported, and then they shared the real story in conversation, and there's contradiction between the two. And that is a challenge. So I think that's something that, Meg, I know you and I will have a very robust follow-up conversation with Grace when she returns, just to kind of share the richness of these responses. And then I commit to incorporating what I learned today and my future conversations. I think that what happened today is exactly the strength of an opportunity like Envision Athens to have a presentation with real conversation, so we can get takeaways that do require some follow-up. Deborah, if you want to talk more offline, I'm happy to do that, and we'll be following up on it.
I just wanted to follow up. I guess my concern is that now that we know that there's this glaring gap, right? How much confidence can we give to this report, specifically with this particular population? And my concern is that since that picture is not complete, that policy decisions, can be made, resources spent in a way that would not be effective, right, for this population in getting them safe and protected. And so, when I look at my role as DA and thinking about this population now, and, I printed out the report, I read through it. I also printed out the ACCPD strategic plan that they had done a couple of years ago. And if I'm going to look at what strategies am I going to implement, what policies, these are very now inaccurate pictures for me. We're talking about making data-based decisions, right? To me now that data is flawed. And I have to be a little concerned about then the policies and strategies and how I use resources right? If I'm just basing it on this.
We do point out in the report that Latinx respondents were more than 6 times more likely to express dissatisfaction with assistance provided by an officer. So I understand that there might be some disparity, but I don't know. It's my opinion that if the full report doesn't display a full contradiction of what Beto has said, it's maybe a much lighter version, a much more toned down version. I will say, we work with people like Beto and the neighborhood leaders in an effort to get the most honest and open responses. And if anybody, part of the reason that we like to interact with organizations like this is to get y'all's feedback. So if anybody knows any ways that we might be able to elicit more honest feedback, more thorough feedback, please always feel free to share that. We're about to start survey design for the 3rd iteration, and we're always open to suggestions, and of course want to get the most meaningful data that we can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm open to any further discussion on how this data plus the qualitative feedback we added to it today maybe can be used to consider future policy. So guys, we are a little bit over time. I know there's more discussion that needs to be had on this, so feel free to stick around if you would like to talk further, but for the sake of honoring everyone's schedule, we are a little bit past the hour mark. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 10th at 8:30. We will continue to meet virtually for the foreseeable future. Thanks again, Meg and Harrison, for your work. John, thanks for your support. And I appreciate each of you for joining us this morning and look forward to what's ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.